Hi, I'm David Singleton, co-founder of L2 Fluency, along with Paul May. This edition of the Greek Peak investigates two words that help us in seeing the story of the woman with an issue of blood in a different light. Join us in exploring the story that starts with Peter's words, "Hey, Chief." The woman who touches Jesus' garment to be healed is one of the better-known stories from the New Testament. One reason is that it is found in all three synoptic Gospels, so anyone reading through the Gospels will encounter the story 3 times. Since the miracle is well known, short, and straightforward, a person might wonder how Greek can lend any further insight into the parts of the story that could change any of our understanding. So let's take a peek into the Greek. The main point of the story is that Jesus heals a lady according to her faith, pure and simple, in both English and Greek. But in Luke's record of the story, chapter 8, verses 45 to 48, delving into the Greek, gives us two insights. First, to see into Simon Peter's rather casual and nonchalant attitude and early relationship with Jesus. And second, to make us aware that Jesus' unrelenting determination to speak with the woman shows the important place of his countrymen believing who he was, as this Jewish woman did. Who Jesus was and is should tower above everything in their belief system because it results in being a child of God. The place to start, however, is after the incident of the woman touching Jesus for healing. Doing so helps in seeing Simon's moment of realization, which mirrors our own path of progress. Jesus had traveled to the regions near Caesarea Philippi after performing miracles and teaching in a number of towns. He stopped somewhere very close to a bluff overlooking the temple where the Romans and Greeks brought tribute and paid homage to the god Pan. Jesus was with the 12 and had stopped to ask, "Who do you say that I am?" He was always strategic when he taught and healed. Stopping to ask this question in this place meant something. Jesus' time on earth was counting down, and there needed to be growth on Simon's part, on all the 12's parts for that matter. Jesus knew it was time to up the ante for his 12 because he had taken note of an attitude Simon had exhibited in the incident of the lady touching his garment. So here, at this beautiful temple where Romans and Greeks came to honor Pan, Jesus wanted to juxtapose the 12's answer against how the Romans and Greeks paid homage to their god Pan. And he wanted to gauge any development in their attitudes like the one Simon exhibited when he devalued Jesus with a title, not even close to who he was, and not even close to the idea Messiah. It had not been that long ago that Jesus had been en route to Capernaum with a group of followers at the request of Jairus, the administrator of Capernaum's synagogue. Jewish synagogues were the heart of every Jewish village, making its leader a VIP. His daughter lay close to death, so he had come to Jesus asking him to heal her. Jesus had obliged, and the group was on its way to Capernaum. Suddenly Jesus stopped the walk. "Who touched me?" he had asked. Simon, in the days before Jesus had named him Peter, didn't see the need for this. He became impatient with Jesus for going off script from their mission and questioned him as to the necessity of halting the flow of things. He then denigrated Jesus' request for the person who touched him to step forward by asking how Jesus could know, since a crowd was squeezing them from every direction. Like Jesus, I wonder when I read the story why Simon would be so out of sorts with someone being healed, on the way to someone being healed. Maybe Simon saw the trip to heal Jairus' daughter as an important opportunity for Jesus, another step on the way to getting Jesus recognized as an important person among the Jews. And since he might have viewed his own role as leader of the 12 behind Jesus, he then would also get recognized, adding to his prestige. After Jesus cured Jairus' daughter, he would be seen as being in the forefront with Jesus. Thus, helping Jesus stay on track was what was really important. But off task or not, Jesus paused. Simon called out to him, Epistata, a word not used anywhere else in the New Testament, except in Luke. Epistata was not an inflammatory term. It was a casual appellation, one used for the leader of an ad hoc group, like the one following Jesus to Capernaum. Luke's account doesn't show that anyone took offense at Simon's using it, but Jesus took note of the term because it showed Simon's underlying attitude toward him as someone much less than who he was. Simon saw him as the group's boss, chief, general, or governor, the term Americans use for an apparent leader of a loosely formed group. It wasn't done to garnish criticism from anyone, the opposite, in fact. But it achieved its intended meaning of showing how casual Simon thought of the person he was addressing. Jesus noticed. Chief, Simon yelled. People are pushing from every direction. Jesus wanted to offset Peter's rather nonchalant way of addressing him and give the woman her dignity, which Simon's depreciative and condescending attitude had taken from her. As soon as the woman reluctantly identified herself, Jesus captured her in his gaze. He turned to the lady who spoke up and called to her, Thugater, daughter, he said. Simon couldn't help but discern the distinction between his attitude and Jesus's. However, Americans don't discern the distinction. There are two reasons for this. First, translators have obscured the distinction by using master as Simon's term, a much more respectful term than epistata is. Second, they use the bare term daughter as Jesus' term for the woman in the crowd. In the case of master, as a translation for epistata, the usual Greek word for master, kurios, is not used. Epistata is a military term. In the case of daughter, Americans are thrown off from understanding the cultural nuances of the passage because we don't address people by their family roles. No parent uses daughter to address a woman or girl. English translations don't draw attention to the semantic nuance contrasting Jesus' term with Simon's term, but there was one. So when modern readers encounter just the naked form for daughter, they see it as abrupt, ungracious, or brusque, carrying no nuance for endearment. But looking further helps one to understand the term better. Two other verses in the New Testament use the address form for daughter. In John 12:15, John quotes Zechariah in addressing Jerusalem, calling Jerusalem daughter of Zion. The word daughter carries with it the additional term Zion, which has the effect of mitigating the abruptness because Zion was thought of fondly. Also, Luke quotes Jesus on the way to the cross, addressing women who are lining his path, saying, daughters of Jerusalem. Again, we see the extra identifier Jerusalem, the city chosen by God to add fondness to the bare term daughters. Another example of Jesus using a role in addressing someone can be seen in John 19:26, where Jesus addresses Mary from the cross. He calls her by the word usually translated as woman, Ginai. His use of woman to address his mother is perceived as direct and abrupt. So some scholars try to overcome this feature of Greek by inserting a quality of endearment before the naked term, translating it dear woman, as in the New Century Version. So when Jesus addresses the woman with the issue of blood, the word daughter might be best understood as having an implied identifier, like Zion or Jerusalem, to mitigate the perceived abruptness. If Jesus is calling her daughter of Zion or Jerusalem, he is elevating her status from mere woman in need of a miracle to a commended person for representing well the faith Jerusalem should have had in him. Or perhaps Jesus is implying that she is his Thugater, daughter of mine, designating her as one who had accepted the truth of his teachings. This would show the contrast well between Simon's dispassionate word epistata and Jesus' way of thinking about the faith it took for a complete stranger to want to touch him, to be restored to health. He wanted to honor her faith. in a not too distant time and place from the woman touching the hem of his garment. In the countryside northeast of Capernaum, around Caesarea Philippi, where people came to pay homage to the god Pan, Jesus turned to a different group following him, just his 12, and asked them, "Who do people say I am?" They told him what people thought. Then he asked them a different question. "Who do you all say that I am?" It is Simon who answers, but this time not with epistata. He had had a chance to be with Jesus a little longer and more time to understand what Jesus was about and who he actually was. He also had had time to realize more clearly what following Jesus meant. He was deliberate in his answer. "You're the one chosen, the Son of the living God." Jesus acknowledged, "Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven." And he changed Simon's name to Petros, the rock, Peter, to commemorate the occasion. It was a milestone for Peter. He had come from calling Jesus Chief to acknowledging him as Son of the living God. Peter's statement is, of course, the rock of acknowledgement that all Jesus' followers make, the Petra, transforming us into children of God. We go through the same phases as Simon in our own faith walk. Sometimes we're flippant with our faith, like Simon was, sometimes condescending. But then something along the way changes in us. It makes us want to touch the hem of Jesus' garment for healing. That something along the way grows inside of us until it finally forms Peter's foundational words on our lips. "You are the one chosen, the Son of the living God." And Jesus commemorates that moment by calling us his own.